Today, we'll talk about the archetype that was so mid that Winda even abandoned it. Gusto was one of the few win decks that braced the TCG in the 2010s and was recognized as one of the most defensive decks in the Hidden Arsenal world. At the same time, the deck did have some powerful Xyzs, floaters, and even a sneaky OTK. These worshippers of the winds needed more than a gust of breeze to blow them into the right direction. So we'll look at their high points and do what we do best, kick this deck while it's down. Today, we'll see why Gusto's flight in the TCG was clipped short. Gusto's impact, or a little of it, started in the Generation Force in August 2008. There, Konami gave us a sneak peek of what's to come with the Gusto Kodor. A level 3 wind monster, when it destroys opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can special summon a wind psychic monster from your deck with 1500 or less defense. Gusto's first monster given was basically a Flamevell Fire Dog. It's too bad it didn't see play, as it was just too weak stat-wise, coming at a laughable 1000 attack. So unless your opponent's deck was filled with monsters with less than 1000 attack, there was really no value in placing this card in your deck. However, Kodor did give us info that the archetype was also set to have wind-type psychic monsters, and had everyone ready their limited emergency teleports for use, as they got a significant amount of support in Hidden Arsenal 5, Steel Swarm Invasion in December 16th, 2011. In the Hidden Arsenal set, they received 8 monsters, a spell, and a trap card. Out of the 8 monsters, 2 were tuners. The central star was Gusto Goldo, a level 3 wind tutor with 500 attack and defense that special summons a level 2 or lower Gusto monster from your deck when it's sent from the field to the graveyard. Eagle nearly follows the same suit. This level 1 wind tuner with 200 attack and 400 defense can special summon a level 4 or lower non-tuner Gusto when it's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard. Gusto Thunderbolt was a level 4 thunder monster with 1500 attack and 1200 defense, which lets you banish 1 Gusto monster from your graveyard to special summon 1 psychic monster with 1500 less defense from your deck if this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard at the end of the battle phase of that turn. As for the psychics, we have 3 of them introduced to the archetype, including one of the most well-known names in Yu-Gi-Oh lore. Winda, Priestess of the Gusto, is a level 2 psychic with 1000 attack and 400 defense. When this card is destroyed by battle by an opponent's attacking monster and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a Gusto tuner from your deck. Cam, Serenity of the Gusto, was a level 4 with 1700 attack, which lets you shuffle 2 Gusto monsters from your graveyard into your main deck to draw 1 card. Finally, Windar, Sage of the Gusto, is a level 6 with 2000 attack and 1000 defense, which lets you target a level 3 or lower Gusto monster in your graveyard and special summon it when this card destroys the monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard. A simple game plan established for the main deck Gusto monsters: either destroy or be destroyed. Eagle, Goldo, Thunderbolt, and Winda were different floaters that got you more monsters from the deck. Goldo was the easiest when it came to floating, as you just need to leave the field and go to the graveyard. Cam was suitable for recycling cards back into the deck, letting you recover your floaters to make sure you never run out of targets. And Windar enables you to special summon a monster from the graveyard when it destroys a monster by battle, but that didn't see much play due to its high level. However, one issue that reared its ugly head was the deadly win/if clause that has doomed so many archetypes. On top of the already painful fact that floaters need to hit the graveyard to gain their effects, they had to be the last thing that happened during any action or chain to get their impact since they state win instead of if. So if you use Goldos or Eagles as synchro materials for a synchro summon of a monster, you would not get their effect, since the last thing that happened wasn't them being sent to the graveyard. A synchro monster was summoned instead. Why? Because basically Konami decided these were keywords and that's how they work. They also seem to have hated the first 2 Gusto synchros as well. Daigusto Goldos was a level 5 psychic synchro with 2200 attack, 800 defense, taking 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner Gusto monsters. Once per turn, you can shuffle 2 Gusto monsters in your graveyard into your main deck to target 1 monster in the field and destroy it. Daigusto Eagles was a level 7 psychic synchro with 2600 attack, needing 1 tuner plus 1 more non-tuner Gusto monsters. During your end phase, you can banish a wind monster from your graveyard to target a face-down card your opponent controls and destroy it. Even with the birds being digivolved, they didn't really have impactful effects that could hurt your opponent. Goldos had the best effect, as trading in 2 Gustos in your grave for a free pop, and it was an easy level 5 to make. Still, its effect could only be used by returning main deck Gusto monsters as a cost, meaning it was impossible to return the extra deck Gusto monsters for reuse. Eagles was disappointing, as its effect only went off during your end phase, and it banished monsters from your graveyard to target face-down cards. While that would help eliminate back row, it was useless against face-up threats and even most back rows, since most back row cards would be used during the main phase or battle phase, well before you could utilize Eagle's effect. Let's add that the deck is also very slow in making their synchros due to a lack of extenders. The spell and trap cards it received didn't help output offensive power or consistency either. Contact with Gusto was a normal spell card that targeted 2 Gusto monsters in your graveyard and 1 card your opponent controls. Return the 2 targets from your grave to your deck, then destroy that card. Blessings for Gusto was a normal trap that targeted 2 Gusto monsters and a 3rd Gusto monster in the grave, so you could return the first 2 targets and special summon the 3rd. While Contact was better in effect than Daigusto Guldos with what it could return from the graveyard to pop, it was considered slower than Guldos. Guldos could have targets in the graveyard just due to it being Synchro summoned. Contact wouldn't be live until you filled your graveyard with targets, making it a small hindrance to seeing in your opening hand. Blessings would be in the same boat, needing 3 targets, making it a card better for the late game. The support can be summed up as average. Though the lack of a searcher was evened out with floaters, the floaters were inconsistent due to the power of words and didn't have any great targets that advance your board. The synchros were mediocre and didn't have as much impact as the generic synchros. And the spells and traps were slow, needing fodder to be used in the graveyard. No one at this point would expect any great things to come from Gusto. However, Hidden Arsenal 6 Omega Xyzs gave support that completely flipped everyone's bingo board. Gusto was rewarded away to OTK and an Xyzs monster that became a staple for many decks. To sum up how to play Gusto, make sure you always have Daigusto Sphreez, a level 6 psychic monster with 2000 attack and 1300 defense, needing 1 tuner and 1 more non-tuner Gusto monsters. When special summoned, you could target a Gusto monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. It couldn't be destroyed by battle, which sets it up perfectly for its most devastating effect, as your opponent would take any battle damage involving face-up Gusto monsters you control. Daigusto Phoenix was a rank 2 Xyzs monster with 1500 attack, needing 2 level 2 monsters to make. By detaching a material from it, you can target one wind monster you control to give it the ability to attack twice that turn during the battle phase. Lastly, Daigusto Falcos was a level 4 Psychic Synchro with 1400 attack and 1200 defense, and needing a tuner plus 1 more non-tuner Gusto monsters. When Synchro summoned, all Gusto monsters currently in the field gain 600 attack. Daigusto Sphreez could be considered a high point in the land of Gusto. It was the main reason Gusto could do gimmick OTKs. You could summon Freeze, summon a floater to your side of the field, and just ram your small monsters into your opponent's monsters while they take all the damage. The only issue was, yet again, the deck could not bring the materials to the field. This remained the case until certain level 3 Psychic blessed the meta with their presence. But we'll get to that later. Phoenix saw play, but more so as a staple in rank 2 decks, as it could end games with the ability to change a window monster into a double attacker in the battle phase, including itself. That made a solid option in the game with 2 hits for 3000 damage total. This made it a mainstay in decks like Raccoons and Paleozoic Frogs, as the majority of these decks had level 2 monsters or mechanics that give the materials to scoop up your opponent. Falcos made things big. Not all things were perfect, but at least this one has a cute main deck monster. Gusto Falco was a level 2 Wing Beast tuner with 600 attack and 1400 defense. When this face-up monster is sent to the graveyard, except by battle, you can special summon 1 Gusto monster from your deck in face-down defense position. Gusto Squirrel was their other level 2 tuner with 0 attack and 1800 defense. When this card is destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a level 5 or higher Gusto monster from your deck. Kamui, Hope of Gusto, was a level 2 flip effect monster with 200 attack and 1000 defense. When flipped, special summon 1 Gusto tuner monster from your deck. Ree's Whirlwind of Gusto is a level 5 psychic monster with 1900 attack and 1400 defense. Once per turn, you can return 1 card from your hand to the bottom of your deck to target 1 Gusto monster and 1 monster your opponent controls, and switch control of both targets. Finally, Musto, Oracle of Gusto, for main deck monsters, was a level 4 psychic with 1800 attack and 900 defense. Once per turn, you can target a Gusto monster to your grave, and target 1 face-up monster on the field. Shuffle the Gusto monster back to the deck, and negate the effect of the targeted monster until the end phase. To round off the subpar support, Whirlwind of Gusto was their new subpar trap that targeted 2 Gusto monsters in your graveyard and shuffled both targets back into the deck to special summon a Gusto monster with 1000 or less defense from your deck if you control no monsters. More support means nothing if the deck has the same issues again. The floaters were still really awkward to use because of their wind claws, causing them to miss timing if you just breathe on them wrong, and needing to hit the graveyard to activate. Over in non-Animal Gusto land, we had a plethora of unmeshable gimmicky monsters, ranging from Kamui being a flip effect monster who could only fetch tuners, Ree's who made you go -1 by flipping a card from your hand back into your deck as a cost, and Musto whose negation effect wasn't quick effect, meaning you couldn't interact with your opponent on their turn. Whirlwind of Gusto also had too many restrictions as well, needing you to not control any monsters and needing 2 targets to float just 1 monster out of your deck. It's not worth running a card you must set before activating. So while the extra deck monsters had some hope this time around, the main deck still suffered from slowness, effects that missed timing, and making our editors check to make sure there were actually 2 cards that had a Whirlwind of Gusto in their names. So with Hidden Arsenal 6 out of the way, we can venture until 2013 when the next Hidden Arsenal series, Knight of 7 Stars, comes into town and gives us one of the best rank 4 Xyzs to brace the game. Daigusto Emeral was its name, and it was a rank 4 Xyz requiring generic materials of just 2 level 4 monsters. By detaching a material once per turn, you can either shuffle 3 monsters from your graveyard back into your deck and draw 1 card, or target one non-effect monster in your graveyard and special summon it. Daigusto Emeral was an instant pop in any deck that could utilize level 4s. Returning 3 monsters of your choice to the deck and gaining a draw was fantastic for recursion of recovering resources. It became even better when another card, Pot of Avarice, which also recurred resources from the graveyard in order to draw cards, got banned in 2013. Daigusto also saw itself hit on the ban list later in 2017, though it wasn't anything as powerful as many of the other rank 4s that have seen the list, like Shockmaster or Excited Knight. It played its fair share in looping and regaining resources at a time in the game where recycling was at its peak and level 4 monsters were in their prime. Just remember the days that you could easily get to Emerald with Norden plus Instant Fusion, or see Zodiac players get back Rat Pier, or a hero deck recycle their Shadow Mist into their deck, all for just 2 generic level 4s. So before it could do more harm, especially with the catastrophe that was a Link format on the horizon, Konami sat Emerald down for 3 years until it was brought back at 1 in 2020, where the card continues to see some play to this current day. That's better than the other counterparts who didn't see any action in Gusto. Gusto Griffin was a level 2 Wing Beast tuner. If this card is sent from the hand to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Gusto monster from your deck on a hard once per turn. Dust Storm of Gusto was a normal trap card that prevented your opponent from activating cards or effects when you declared attacks with your Gusto monsters. They finally gave Gusto their first floater that didn't miss timing, but put it on the arguably worst one, as Gustos didn't have any Archetype support that discarded monsters or sent stuff from hand to graveyard. The slap on the face was making it a hard once per turn effect, as you'll be able to pitch this card directly every time. Dust Storm also merited little to no play outside of guaranteeing you could set up your gimmicky OTK. However, being another trap card made it a slow, bricky piece that needed setup in a deck that still struggled to make its Synchros and Xyzs. Add in the fact that Emerald saw more play everywhere besides his Archetype, and you have the hidden Arsenal 7 support being a straight bust. What Gusto lacked was more extenders that could help them place more than just a single monster per turn on the field. And that's where one particular level 3 Psychic came out a year later and Primal Origin helped. Pilica, Descendant of Gusto, is a level 3 Psychic tuner with 1000 attack and 1500 defense. When it's normal special summon, you can target a Wind tuner monster in your graveyard and special summon it in face-up defense position. If you activate this effect, its effect is negated, and you're locked into only special summoning Wind monsters for the rest of the turn. Pilica was one of the best extenders in 2014, not just for Gusto, but for other Wind archetypes like Dragoonity, Speedroid, and Wind Witch, who also utilized Pilica for their extra deck players, whether Synchro or XC summons, as Pilica's restrictions was just attribute specific. So whether you wanted a simple high Speedroid Chanbara, go for Clearwing Synchro Dragon, or have an Omni-Negate in Totem Bird, Pilica could get you there, unless it was pulling a Gusto and missing timing. Once again, even a strong extender is faulty due to wording, as Pilica could only do this when it was summoned as the last thing to happen on the field. So if your face down E-Telly is a target for destruction and you chain it to summon out Pilica, Pilica gives you just win because it wasn't the last action in the chain. So the good news was that Pilica made it easier for Gusto to make Sphreez. The bad news was they had yet another inconsistent card that could be ruined because of an MST targeting your E-Telling and causing you to whiff. After 4 years of support, Gusto was a deck with low offensive support, a gimmick OTK, inconsistent floaters, and an extender who lost to the worst ruling in the game. Konami finally tried to rectify this with the final 3 cards given to the Archetype in Dawn of Majesty. To round off the world of Gusto, Gusto Vidir was a level 3 Wing Beast tuner with 600 attack and 1000 defense. If a face-up Gusto monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can send 1 Gusto from your deck to the graveyard, then special summon 1 Gusto monster from your hand on a hard once per turn. The second main deck card they gained was the spell Tailwind of Gusto. This equip spell can only be equipped with this card to a Gusto monster, and that monster equipped with this card couldn't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. It had a graveyard effect that allowed you to banish this card from your grave and discard 1 Wind monster from your hand to add a Gusto spell trap card from your deck to your hand. Its final effect lets you special summon a monster from your deck based on the level/rank of the equipped monster. If a 4 or lower, you can special summon a Gusto monster from your deck with a different type than the equipped monster. If 5 or higher, you can special summon 1 level 1 tuner from your deck. And this effect was just once per turn as long as the card was still equipped and on the field. Vidir and Tailwind targeted many of the problems Gustos couldn't overcome. Vidir's effect was guaranteed every time, not hindered by missing timing, and had an effect which could siege your graveyard with more Gustos and bring out a monster from your hand. This made it Pilica's best friend, as when you summon Pilica with this card's effect, Pilica wouldn't suffer from missing timing, since Pilica's summoning wouldn't be the last thing to happen on the field. If you didn't have it in hand, there's no worry, since Tailwind could fetch it for you or any missing piece directly from your deck. It also fetched Gusto spells and traps with its graveyard effect, including another copy of itself for next turn. To round off the last of the Gusto support was their new monster, Daigusto Laplampilica. a level 6 Psychic Synchro that requires 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner Gusto monsters. If this card is Synchro summoned, you can special summon 1 Gusto monster from your hand and 1 from your deck with their effects negated. Then, immediately after this effect resolves, Synchro summon a Gusto Synchro monster using those exact 2 monsters. But you can't special summon anything else for the rest of the turn except wind monsters. This card furthermore made your other Gusto Synchro monsters untargetable by your opponent's card effects. Before you conclude that this card can be abusable, let it be known that it can only be special summoned once per turn. However, it doesn't take away from the fact that it helped improve Gusto combos to get to their Archetype Synchro monsters and protect them from being targeted. It's too bad Gustos had no noteworthy Synchros outside of Sphreez to utilize this effect. While these 3 cards were great additions to Gusto, it doesn't take the world's best player to understand that these 3 cards were not going to help an archetype with outdated cards in 2023. With this, Gustos blew their way out the door. Winda went on to terrorize people in Shaddolls, and everyone else saw Ritual Beasts and said they were close enough to being playable that Gusto would be. To avoid being taken away from any accomplishments Gustos did, they did introduce some cards that made a mark in the format. Emerald, Phoenix, and Pilica all saw play in some capacity. Heck, even Gusto was seen as an excellent, fun deck as more support came out. And the fact that it was a good defensive deck that had one of the funniest ways to OTK your opponent was a plus. However, they couldn't escape the power of grammar and weird Konami rulings, making their floaters miss timing over common things. It shouldn't cost you an effect because you needed to synchro summon or a chain link, causing your Pilica to whiff. Add in that they had lackluster spells and traps, and you have a deck that requires so much resources to get back so little. So, though the deck has the lore, a good fanbase, and a few memorable moments in the early 2010s meta, it just didn't have the gusto. Come on, it was right there.